Congressman Israel, thanks very much for your time tonight. It's good to see you.
It's great to be with you, Liz.
I'd like to get started by talking a little bit about this health care vote today, really, and how it's going to play in politically. I mean, reports are that we're probably going to see this go on for some time. The fight is going to continue all the way up into 2012, which means that health care played a major role in this cycle, and it also is going to play a major role in the next cycle. As the head, the new head of the DCCC, the political arm of the Democrats in the House, how are you going to counteract that? Because it did not go well. It was a key talking point for the Republicans this time around.
Well, we're going to counteract it by holding the Republicans accountable for their actions. You know, they came to Washington promising three things. They promised to create jobs, they promised to reduce deficits, they promised to change the way Washington works. The only thing they're doing this week, the only jobs they're creating, are jobs for press secretaries to draft press releases on a repeal of health care that they know full well will not pass the Senate and will not be signed by the President. Instead of reducing deficits, all they're doing is adding $230 billion to the deficit, according to the Congressional Budget Office. And they're not changing Washington. In fact, they're making Washington work because most of them will vote to repeal health care for their constituents, but have said that they will take their congressional health benefit for themselves. That is a stunning act of hypocrisy, and they should be held accountable for that kind of hypocrisy, and we intend to hold them accountable for that kind of hypocrisy.
Okay, but how do you craft that message? Because clearly the issue of repealing health care was something that resonated, particularly when it came to Tea Party voters, and those people were definitely active and moving to the polls. And you're going to have, depending on what you end up with in terms of the Republicans in the presidential race and who they pick, you could have, again, another polarizing race. And that, going forward, it might not help you win back control of the House.
Well, two things, Liz. One, you know, people are entitled to their opinion. You can be for health care, you can be against health care. You cannot be for health care for yourself as a member of Congress and against it for everyone else. And I think that is a resonant message. Again, people can have different opinions on the specific legislation that was passed, but they want members of Congress to abide by the same rules that we're asking the American people to abide by. And that act alone, saying I'll take it, but it's not good enough for the people I represent, I think is very resonant back home. And the second issue is this. You know, the American people have themselves had different opinions on this. In fact, the most recent series of polling, less than 24 hours old, says that 3 out of 4 Americans do not want the health care law repealed in its entirety. Only 1 out of 4 Americans wants it repealed in its entirety. And the Republicans, over the next 48 hours, will cater to the 1 out of 4 Americans who want it repealed, knowing full well that this is an enormous waste of time because the Senate's not going to pass it, the President's not going to sign it. They ought to be focusing on jobs and the economy and bringing down debt instead of pandering to 1 out of 4 Americans who want to repeal, even though it's not going to happen.
Congressman, just to be clear, you're saying that any Republican or anyone, and assuming that there might even be a few Democrats here or there are very conservative Democrats who go for this, anyone who votes yes should themselves not accept the health care package that they get as a congressperson, okay?
Absolutely, that's what I believe. And in fact, Liz, last week when the Republicans adopted their rules for the House of Representatives, we offered an amendment that simply said that if you're going to, have these rules of the House, you ought to disclose to your constituents whether you will accept the federal employee health benefits package. Every single Republican, every single one, voted against that amendment. So they voted to hide their health care while they're repealing it for everyone else. And I think that is fundamentally unfair.
Okay, so we can see, obviously, what's going to start, the message that's starting to come out now. We see, for example, right after the election, we also talked to Senator Schumer. He talked about the importance of the middle class. You're talking about jobs in the economy. You're talking about health care. These are going to be the messages going forward as you try to win back the House. Here's the problem. In terms of finances, you guys have an uphill climb. I mean, you're almost $20 million in debt, while the NRCC, your Republican counterpart, has $12 million in debt, and they have the upper hand because they're in the majority. So how do you get over that? I know you're already working on it. Those phones have got to be burning up in your office.
Yes, we are working on it. By the way, show me a political committee in America, and I will show you a national political committee, and I'll show you a national political committee that is carrying
Fair
debt.
point.
That is just part of the process.
Fair point.
Secondly, let me tell you, this past December, our grassroots fundraising at the DCCC was just off the charts. We raised over $1 million in online contributions. This isn't the big donors. This isn't the PAC community. These are average Americans who want the Democrats to take the House back because they know we are a much better deal for the middle class. These are people who are angry that the Republicans promised to change Washington, and the first thing they did is they appointed someone known as the Prince of Pork as chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. They appointed Spencer Backus as chairman of the Financial Services Committee, who said that in his view, and this is a quote, "My committee should not regulate the banks, it should serve the banks." And so as a result, our finances, our fundraising, has been off the charts, and these are low-dollar donors, $1 million in December. That's never happened before in a December in an off cycle.
Okay, here's another problem, though. Your own party is divided. You've got the left and the right not so happy in the Democratic Party, I'm talking about, not so pleased with each other. First of all, right off the bat, you had about 19 folks who voted against keeping Nancy Pelosi as leader. She's still there, obviously in the minority. And then you have a president who, there are some members of your party think, who should be more aggressive as a spokesman for the party, beating the Democratic drum, if you will, and instead he's being a pragmatist to try and get something done. Getting things done, of course, is good, and in Washington and as in Albany, you have to negotiate. But that, from a political standpoint, doesn't that make your job harder?
Liz, look, the Democratic caucus has always been diverse. We have a diversity of opinions. It is true. We have blue dogs who represent southern districts who lean a little further to the right than some Democrats. We have progressives in districts who lean, to the left. But I will compare our caucus to the Republican caucus any day of the year. They are completely fragmented right now. They are catering to a group of extremists, and they themselves are now in hot water with those extremists. I'll give you an example. They promised that they would reduce our spending in Washington by $100 billion. What's the first thing they said? Well, that was a hypothetical. We're not sure we can do it. And so the head of the Tea Party actually said that this is the fastest fall from grace that he's ever seen. So you've got a Republican caucus that needs to cater to the far right. It also knows that it was able to win this election by getting some support from independent voters who, based on the first 2 weeks in Congress, are realizing that there's buyer's remorse, that the Republicans are just business as usual, Washington as usual, hypocrisy after hypocrisy after hypocrisy. And as a result, the caucus itself on the Republican side is much more fragmented than we are.
But Congressman, is this the strategy, though? The strategy is to say, well, yes, I am, but what about you? I mean, in other words, you guys are going to go to voters and say, and make an argument to put Democrats back in charge of the House, right? By saying the Republicans are a mess, more of a mess than we are?
No, not at all. In fact, this is going to be the fundamental difference between the Democrats as a minority now and the Republicans in the minority. When the Republicans were in the minority, they said no, 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 and then attacked Democrats for national challenges. Didn't lift a finger to help. We're going to be a little different. We're going to offer constructive alternatives. We're not going to say no. We will disagree with them when we have principal disagreements. But in contrast to them, we will offer alternatives. Alternatives to strengthen the middle class. Alternatives to support the growth of small businesses through entrepreneurship and innovation to create new jobs. And alternatives to reduce our deficits. So we're going to offer those constructive, responsible alternatives. We're going to vote against some of the things they're trying to do. We're going to vote against increasing debts by $230 billion, which is what they're going to do when they repeal health care. We're going to vote against repealing consumer protections for people who now have those protections in the health care bill. But we're not just going to stand back and say, no, we're not them, which was the Republican playbook for 4 years.
Okay, I know that you are already recruiting. Of course, 2011 is just getting started, but I know you're already out there. What exactly do you see, specifically in New York? Which races do you think that you actually might be able to get? You've got actually, amazingly, the most Republican pickups happened here in New York, despite the fact that New York is, of course, one of the most Democratic states in the nation. So what are you looking at? Are you looking at the Hanna seat? Are you looking at the Reed seat, specifically upstate, of course? I'm sure Mike McMahon down in Staten Island, I know, is already trying to plot a comeback.
We are looking at all of the above, Liz. We need 25 seats to take the House back. Let me give you the landscape. We need 25 seats to take the House back. Right now in America, there are 14 districts currently represented by a Republican that voted for both John Kerry and President Obama. So we need 25 seats to take the House back. Over half have strong Democratic DNA. 61 districts in America currently represented by Republicans voted for President Obama. Many of those seats are in New York. And so we're going to go after the Staten Island, Brooklyn seat. And the new Congressman, Mike Grimm, is an example of why I think we can win those seats back. This is a guy who campaigned against Mike McMahon, promising to repeal health care. And then he was asked by the Daily News, well, are you going to take health care for yourself while repealing it for the people of Staten Island and Brooklyn? And here's what he said. I don't have health care, and God forbid I get into an accident, and I couldn't afford the operation. That can happen to anyone. I would be a ward of the state. Hello? That's why we need protections for people. Not just if you're a congressman, but for everybody.
Okay.
Anne Marie Burkle in Syracuse, same deal. We're going to ask her, you going to take health care for yourself and repeal it for everybody else? Congressman Reed in the southern tier of New York, we're going to ask him the same question. We're going to hold them accountable, and if they're not accountable, we're going to recruit candidates, and we're going to win those seats back for the middle-class voters of those districts.
Okay, so are you saying to me that you think you could win every one of those GOP pickups? Do you think you can win them back in 2012?
I am saying to you that we are going to compete effectively in every single one of those seats.
Okay, and what about the issue of redistricting? Because we think that there's going to be 2 seats. It looks like right now 2 seats are going to be gone. We're talking a lot about the likelihood that one of them is going to come out of upstate. One of them is probably, so there's going to be some growth down in your neck of the woods because that's why where the population has actually spiked in Long Island. Things are going to get all moved around. A loss of a seat is a big deal. 2 seats is an even bigger deal. So where are those seats going to come out of?
Well, I don't know where they're going to come out of. We know that New York is going to lose 2 seats. All I want is a fair map. We will be able to field candidates and to compete in virtually every congressional district in New York, so long as we have a fair map. Now, 10 years ago, we didn't have a fair map. Tom DeLay, who is now behind bars, stole congressional seats away in a completely unfair political process. We will never be Tom DeLay again.
Okay, so what does that mean to you then? So a nonpartisan redistricting committee or commission that they're talking about here taking the power out of the lawmakers' hands, are you comfortable with that?
Well, this is a decision. The states are in charge of redistricting. The state has to make that decision as to what the process will be. I'm not as interested in the process as I am in the result.
Well,
and
sure.
The result should be a fair map that we can compete in and others can compete in.
Okay, but will it be fair, in your opinion, if it is completely, wholly nonpartisan? I mean, you've got to be concerned about the outcome if, in fact, it's given to people that you can't influence. You can go up to Albany anytime you want and say, hey, friends in Albany, I would like you to, help me out here.
Again, Liz, the process is of less concern to me as the result. And however they get to a fair map that allows us to compete, I'm comfortable with that. But we want to make sure that there is an open and fair process so that we end up with competitive maps.
Okay, well, we'll be checking in with you again because I'm sure when those lines get drawn, we are going to see a lot more of you. Thanks a lot, Congressman Israel. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Liz.